but here are the reveals of what you've been waiting for. There is going to be the Zacian and Kyogre. We've seen that paired off with the Shedinja before. There's the Incineroar, but most importantly, Galarian, Moltres, and Porygon 2 round out the team. So it's already looking a little different from maybe that French variety that we saw earlier from Tomar. Looking over at Eisuke's team, we do have, of course, the Zacian and the Groudon. Okay, that's not particularly exciting. The Thundurus, we've seen that a little bit, and there's the Incineroar, but the mix-up. Okay, Gigantamax Charizard is cool, but you know what can also take advantage of the sun? Gigantamax Venusaur with the Chlorophyll ability, and then to round it out, strangely enough, a Tapu Fini.
But as we get into this game number 1, we will be able to see what both of these players will lean on to start off this set. We've got the Kyogre and the Zacian right away here from Daniele, so going for that double restricted pair. And on the side of Eisuke, you do have the Thundurus and the Venusaur. So where's the synergy here? If maybe the Groudon is in the back, then that Venusaur is actually looking mighty good. Unless you want to pair that Thundurus with something else as well. This is a nice kind of split lead to figure out which direction you want to go in.
The Thundurus can cause some interesting problems as well, just because I think the Thundurus on this team looks to be one of the much more supportive versions. Would be really good to be able to add those scary faces, those eerie impulses, or those thunder waves even, just to try and, you know, slow down a Pokemon like Zacian and cause a number of problems there. I mean, thunder waving Zacian can be super effective because it lasts the whole game. You also apply a little bit of physical, you know, pressure to, not physical, but special attacking pressure to that Kyogre just by being able to Thunderbolt it. But I think the Venusaur has that in hand. That said, Thundurus switching out. What a shot. The sun immediately coming to the fore here, and Venusaur probably pretty pleased about that.
Yeah, and there's no Tapu Fini on the field as well to set that misty terrain, so you know that Venusaur will be able to go fast, whether it is going to be to shut down a Pokemon or just go ahead and start rolling with that damage. So we will go ahead and see that Gigantamax come through from the Venusaur.
I think it makes so much sense. If you're giving it Sun, you're giving it Chlorophyll right away, you want to get going with it. And the big thing here is going to be targeting. Making sure you get maximum value out of these Dynamax turns, making sure you're not targeting and wasting things into the Protect or causing problems that way is going to be tough. And very wisely, actually, there is going to be Daniele Dynamaxing that Kyogre. If you're expecting to be caught by, you know, the Gigantamax moves from the Venusaur, then you do want to Dynamax. You are going to need a little bit, in this case, double more health to deal with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this might just be what you need to be able to survive, but it's a Max Flare as well. Whether it is the Flare or that Max Quake that we also see from that Venusaur, that is going to hurt. And with the sun boosting that damage as well, Zacian just going to get knocked out, and this Kyogre too. While this Max Geyser will be able to reset the weather, it's still not going to do very much damage, despite the fact that that Groudon just switched in. It will survive.
I'd say that's a fair chunk of damage.
It wasn't a knockout, I suppose, is where I was going with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good amount, bringing it down into the red. What's definitely interesting there is I think that already reveals the item on the Groudon. The Groudon there taking way more damage in the sun than many other Groudons we've seen, so maybe something unique when it comes to the item choice there, and something to watch for later. There's Shedinja already coming to the fore, of course, for Daniele, feeling pretty good about its position because the Groudon very easy to knock out, and maybe this Greninja can do a whole lot of work. You've got to start asking yourself, how many options does Eisuke actually have to hit this Pokemon? Honestly, outside of the Groudon, I'm not seeing very many just at a cursory glance. The Groudon needs to switch out because it needs to reset the sun. That is going to be so important. It's being forced into that by the Kyogre boldly staying in and then just throwing down the Max Geyser to catch it up. The big thing here, though, is, you know, even if it comes in, its job may just be to set the sun. I genuinely think there could be a lot of wiggle room for this Shedinja.
Oh, the Shedinja as well, just going for one of its top supportive moves, that Ally Switch, because that G-Max Vine Lash, that Shedinja's going to take that with its Wonder Guard.
Yeah, and that means you don't get any effects from that G-Max Vine Lash. That's a huge ally switch, keeping the Kyogre safe, and the Kyogre just tearing through that Thundurus immediately with another Max Geyser. It's got control of the weather, so that first turn, leaving the Kyogre alone, is really coming back to haunt Eisuke. Yes, he is going to get control of the weather later on as soon as that sun comes back in, but showing the Zacian right now actually means that at the end of the Dynamax for the Venusaur, it's, you know, the final turn, which is one of the most impactful ones, not going to have access to the Chlorophyll.
Yeah, that does make it a little bit vulnerable, but I mean, the fact that this Kyogre as well, it's not really threatening any sort of super effective damage that we know of so far. Sometimes we do see some type of ice-type attack, but Shedinja just continuing to try to swap the places of these Pokemon around to get the better of Eisuke's Venusaur. But the substitute here as well from the Zacian will keep it quite safe, but once again, Eisuke will miss the G-Max Vine Lash, leaving Kyogre safe to go for another Max Geyser right into that Zacian substitute.
Oh, that's so unfortunate. Falling for the Ally Switch play again, attacking into the Wonder Guard, not getting your G-Max Vine Lash in play at the second time of asking. That is absolutely devastating. But Daniele is feeling really good about this position because honestly, the Shedinja is causing so many problems. I think that Groudon is being saved for later when it can maybe hit that Shedinja a little bit freer. But you know, you can't do that when the Kyogre's on the field. The Kyogre's potentially faster than you, and the Kyogre's just going to be able to knock you out because of how much damage you took on the way in. This is a really sticky situation, and just kind of wasting time with these substitutes a little bit to try and make sure one of these attacks lands. This time the Frenzy Plant will target the correct slot, and the Kyogre is going to be able to take that.
Whoa, that's really big survival. And now you can see the Kyogre going to go for the Origin Pulse as well, right off the back of that. But that's got to feel so good for Daniele to be able to keep that Kyogre around and also get that double connect from that Origin Pulse, because now the Zacian, it's here to play.
Ooh.
But the Poltergeist miss.
Yeah, the Shedinja not ally switching there. Eisuke is really just going for every turn and saying, I will get your Kyogre, not trying to make any reads, waiting for a turn where the Shedinja actually goes for an attack and finally gets it there. But this is really a tale of two item choices between your Kyogre and your Groudon, your Ruby Sapphire legendaries, if you will. They really do work well together, but just look at the impact those item choices have. Being able to, you know, do things a little bit differently and take that Frenzy Plant quite comfortably is so important. That said, going into the Wonder Guard again, predicting the Ally Switch play, really unfortunate that he doesn't Ally Switch this turn, and this mind game has been, honestly, 3 turns have been very successful for Daniele on this.
Yeah, and that Poltergeist is not going to miss a second time, so that last little bit of damage to the Venusaur will be a second knockout in this turn, despite the rain being removed from the field now, and now you do have weather control just a bit for Eisuke available. That Groudon is still so low, and when we see these Shedinja, they're usually running some type of priority attack. That Groudon is already so low.
Yeah, that Groudon can easily get picked off by a Shadow Sneak, and honestly, even if it connects, it's got way too much work to do. It's got to get some damage down on the Kyogre, or else the Kyogre will hit an Origin Pulse at some point. It's also got to hit the Shedinja potentially twice as well because of that Focus Sash. It may not be even afforded that opportunity, as there it is, Shadow Sneak. Ooh, doesn't get it. This is the spread move I thought it could do, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if Shedinja doesn't go down here, which as soon as that item pops, we confirm the Focus Sash, that just means that next turn, he's going to get caught by the Shadow Sneak, not going to make it next turn anyway, as the Ice Beam does the damage. So Daniele putting on what can only be described as a Kyogre masterclass, keeping it in the face of a Groudon switch in there, and being able to, you know, just reset up the weather and cause so many problems.
I mean, we see this sometimes from, like, the French Rain team that we talk about, right? Like, Thomas, one of those players that has used that Shedinja Kyogre team quite frequently. But this, of course, has some different flavor elements to it, but that Shedinja is still so pivotal to make sure that your damage dealer is in the right place, and that you also are able to kind of pivot around and make sure that a specific Pokemon are in the places that you want them to be.
Daniele is going to show off a little bit more of his team for us. Thank you very much, as we do get to see that Galarian Moltres come to the fore in the lead here in game number 2.
Yeah, and Galarian Moltres, we have seen a couple of different versions of it, as we have seen from previous formats, but a lot of the time, you know, that Galarian Moltres is going to have that Berserk ability, so once it gets to half HP, below half HP, then it will get a boost to its special attack. And on top of that, the Fiery Wrath is a really interesting move choice because of the flinch ability. Being
able to flinch has always been an annoying factor on any Pokemon move. How many years have we talked about and lamented the Rock Slide? Just bringing it back with Fiery Wrath is really annoying, and it does the same thing, right? It spreads out to your opponents both side of the board, so a nice bit of spread damage that can flinch. Doesn't get as much hate as Rock Slide did, and I think maybe if it does well here, it might start getting bored into that same kind of question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's still like a low chance to flinch, but it's still enough of that pressure that you probably want to consider it. But another turn 1 Dynamax here. It will be that Venusaur just getting the Gigantamax and starting to get some damage out again.
It has to do so much work, but it doesn't look like it's going to get paired up with the Groudon. I mean, now you're in a neutral weather. Probably feels pretty good about the chances to be able to deal with this. So a lot of work going in there, and you really want to get some damage down on the Moltres. It's kind of a tough one, right? With the Galarian Moltres, you do not want to activate Berserk. So you want to do about 40 to 45% and then find a way to push that on to do the full 55 to 60%.
Well, sometimes what we were seeing as well with these Galarian Moltres, and I'm curious to see if this one is also one of those, is that you had some type of recovery berry. So once you got one Berserk boost, then the berry would activate, give you more HP, so you could potentially get a second one. But looks like it's going to be a bit of a defensive game here for this turn 1 for Eisuke, which is going to shut off that move here as Incineroar gets to go for a parting shot. Great way to just start mitigating some of that damage.
I really, really like that play there. Making sure that the attack stats drop over onto that Galarian Moltres means that if it does hit with one of these max airstreams, there's more of a chance now that the Venusaur is going to be able to take it. There's also the fact that it pivots your Pokemon out very, very quickly, and you are able to bring in something different. So reveal of the Zacian here over on Eisuke's side is the Intrepid Sword boost. No shock there. That Intrepid Sword, you know, is going to help out, going to make sure that Behemoth Blade does even more damage, and maybe it's a case of just being able to double into this Galarian Moltres now, get a huge amount of damage down and deal with it, potentially taking that max airstream in the middle because of that earlier parting shot. So a lot to kind of make up for there, as yeah, Daniele does kind of what he, you know, wants to do, which, you know, it's kind of the reverse of what Eisuke did to him, right? Bring in the Incineroar, get rid of the Intrepid Sword boost turn 1. Yeah, turn 2, look what's happening. The Incineroar's coming in to deal with it, but I don't think that slot's going to be the focal point in this turn.
No, you're going to see that go right into the Galarian Moltres just to make sure that it survives. But look at that. It still does enough damage to activate Moltres' Berserk ability. So you will see that special attack get brought back up to neutral as the G-Max Vine Lash as well. Not doing a whole lot of damage, but you actually get that residual set up this time.
Yeah, getting that residual damage is absolutely huge, and is definitely going to help out if this like Galarian Moltres doesn't have something like Roost. You see how impactful the parting shot is there. Even with the Berserk ability, it's still not enough with the max airstream to get that knockout, but it is going to start winning in that speed tie, and that's something that's big for the Moltres, right? As you mentioned at the top of the game, the Moltres is in such an awkward speed tier. Being able to get it out of there by boosting it up is absolutely huge. So I really, really like that. The change up, being able to cause some problems with it. It definitely helps, but this game a lot better for Eisuke. Definitely staying in the game a little bit longer and being able to push a little bit more, but that's all it's going to be for the Venusaur. One G-Max Vine Lash was all it needed to get down before it leaves the field.
I think maybe Eisuke hoping that the Zacian is going to be enough to be able to switch it out here, but the Intimidate as well, just going to drop the damage once again, mostly looking at that Incineroar, but also acting as a nice pivot in case something else is going to come its way. But it's a free switch here. The Max Guard now coming through, but also the Close Combat. Ooh, that's
hello.
one that we don't see super often, but it softens up that Incineroar, that once that G-Max Vine Lash damage comes through at the end of the turn, that should be a knockout. But looks like Incineroar is just going to knock himself out here from the residual of the Flare Blitz. Yeah, if that is enough, that's not a lot.
It's not a lot at all, but there is going to have to be the G-Max Vine Lash. So it did 8 to itself, but the remaining 3 is taken away by that. Would have liked to get that targeting into the Venusaur. Second best option would have been the Zacian, and honestly the third best option is that Incineroar that does take it very, very nicely. So a good smart switch actually with that Venusaur leaving the field, and honestly this Moltres is getting dangerously low too. If it does have access to Roost, it needs to Roost as soon as possible. You know, the problem is it's not been able to do that yet, being in that Dynamax form. The Kyogre showing itself off pretty early is going to throw up that weather first thing, and that could mean there is an endgame where it's just going to be Sun the whole time. I think if Galarian Moltres has Roost, it has to Roost now, and that really is because otherwise it's just going to get knocked out by the Vine Lash Ferocious Beating between turns.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be the case. I mean, it's sitting at such a low HP that at the end of this turn, it would be knocked out. But you're also getting into a very dangerous position here if you're Daniele, because your Kyogre's on the field, and the fact that the Venusaur left, not only does that tell me that that Venusaur is trying to be preserved for later, but possibly, and more than likely, that Groudon is also in the back to be able to help boost that speed.
Well, assuming you can, you know, the Groudon's going to be in a really really good position here. The Groudon definitely being saved because of the respect being put down onto that Shedinja. That Shedinja's not even here this game, so maybe something to look out for game number 2. But a nice fake out onto the Kyogre is going to help out. The Moltres didn't leave, by the way. The Fiery Wrath going into that Incineroar isn't going to be the biggest problem, but we know what happens with the G-Max Vine Lash. That's how important it was to Eisuke's strategy, and you can just see it taking a knockout here. It already took the knockout on the Incineroar, and it's going to put that Kyogre in range to get knocked out by something like the Frenzy Plant.
Yeah, not only that, but now this is the problem I was looking towards, is that Zacian has to come in, and Daniele is down to his final 2 Pokemon for this game too. So Eisuke has a lot of agency when it comes to what type of Pokemon he wants to put on the field to be able to match up against that. And if he does have that Groudon, then he can control the weather and make sure that those Kyogre's attacks are not going to be nearly as devastating.
If it's a Groudon, which it very likely will be, this game should be all but wrapped up, making sure you get a little bit more damage down onto the Kyogre. But at some point, you know, the end game board position for Eisuke is just Groudon, Venusaur. Venusaur obviously can't Gigantamax anymore, but that's all you really needed. The Kyogre's now in range to get a knockout on it by the Frenzy Plant, and then the Zacian can get cleaned up by something like that Groudon as well. So that pairing would really quite clearly seal this one. There is a world where Eisuke could also really try and lock up the game if he wants to get more Intimidates down onto this Zacian. Does still have all 4 Pokemon, so switches are plentiful. Yeah, the Incineroar leaving the field. Looks like we're going to be seeing that Groudon right away, so the sun is just set right now.
It is, and then, but also maybe, just maybe, we can find out a little bit more about how these Zacian are trained against each other. You know, which one is going to be just a touch faster, but it's the close combat from Eisuke's Zacian that will be the first to move. And the critical hit on top of it, though, still doesn't feel good. But the drop in defense and special defense maybe means that Zacian's Behemoth Blade is going to be a big one, as that's the target.
Yeah, I mean, a double drop from 2 close combats means this is an easy one-hit knockout. And the Kyogre's in a really tough position here. It's so low. Does need to connect an Origin Pulse, single target in the sun. And then the Venusaur's going to be asked to do a lot of work as the sun remains. Honestly, that's a huge amount of damage, and that is kind of the drawback, in my opinion, of not taking the Assault Vest on Groudon. I've really come to like it. The Kyogre caught by the Vine Lash Ferocious Beating. It's not enough as it clings on, so this Venusaur is going to have to potentially throw something its way, or, of course, the Incineroar, which would be able to come in and catch it with a fake out. So the Kyogre, you know, as we know, over on Daniele's side, is the Assault Vest version. It took that move so well early doors, you know, would be able to say, you know what, you're just going to get faked out for the knockout here.
Yeah, because a Kyogre at this point, you can't go for something like the Protect, even if it was available, just because you're going to get knocked out by Vine Lash damage, and we also saw that it's probably Assault Vest, so it doesn't have that anyway. But, you know, Zacian here too, it's not going to be able to clean up both of these Pokemon since it doesn't have any spread type attacks, and you have 2 good targets on the field that you could secure a knockout on, but you can't use both. So fake out, though, actually going into the Zacian here, and so Zacian going to flinch, but Groudon moving just a touch faster than this Kyogre will be able to get the knockout.
Speedy Groudon there, being able to play this one really nicely, just making sure it gets the knockout with the Shadow Claw. Well played on that one. I think the fake out would have been a funnier knockout, would have been more comical in my opinion. But at the end of the day, you know, making sure you get the knockout is all that really matters. As now it's 3v1. This Zacian, though, you know, is going to get flare blitzed at some point by this Incineroar. It's also going to get potentially caught by a Precipice Blades, but it gets to choose which one it doesn't want to get knocked out by.
Yeah, you don't want to give it too much agency as the Precipice Blades here will connect onto the Zacian, knocking it out and tying up the series. We are 1 apiece here in Swiss round number 4 between Daniele and Eisuke. Going into game number 3, we're going to see some intense stuff.
Really nice bounce back, actually, from Eisuke there. I think changing up the game plan significantly was really, really important. It's going to be a very interesting match if that's what we're going to see. There is going to be, once again, that Zacian Venusaur. I do really, really like that. I think the Venusaur can do a lot on its own, but right back to the Galarian Moltres.
Okay, so Daniele must feel really confident that maybe if things were played just a touch differently in that game number 2, that this Galarian Moltres would be able to sweep the competition. But the fact that Eisuke has gone back to basics here with that Venusaur and that Zacian, you definitely have the ability to kind of play around with that some more. You know you have some big damage on the board, and the way that Eisuke was able to pivot and rotate around really did help to keep that Venusaur alive.
The Venusaur getting the Vine Lash down was honestly one of the biggest factors in his game number 2 win as well. Those little bits of residual damage between turns added up. It took 2 of the 4 knockouts when he won the game, and it just feels like as long as he lands that move, he could just be in a great position to continue to win another game in this set. So a lot riding, I think, on the move choice. Maybe that Shedinja's in the back, but it seems very hard to justify giving up all of the pieces. Incineroar coming in, we like that. We like the Zacian getting intimidated. Of course, that is going to be a little bit annoying if you're Eisuke, but you can still do a lot of damage with the Behemoth Blade.
Well, we saw that as well, that despite the fact that you ended up bringing that Zacian down to neutral, when it went for the Behemoth Blade onto the Dynamax Galarian Moltres, you still activated the Berserk ability, like it still got it to below half. But it's another pivot here as well, as both Zacian leave the field. Eisuke also bringing out the Incineroar, but there's no Dynamax this time around. It's just going to be a solid Protect, as that will negate the Behemoth Blade coming out from Eisuke's Zacian.
But Daniele got a much more impactful Incineroar switch in. He managed to land an Intimidate onto the Zacian. Of course, the Intimidate going down onto the opposing Galarian Moltres. Not that important and not feeling that good if you're Eisuke. So definitely a lot more value in that one. Of course, you did get it on the opposing Incineroar, but that's not really the damage dealer that you need to be worried about. The Moltres, realizing what happened in the last game, does decide to take its time. And there's all 4 Pokemon confirmed for Daniele, so no sign of that Shedinja, which I was so impressed with in Game 1, must mean that he's confident in the game plan that he can play around with this Galarian Moltres.
Ooh, look at that. We're going to see Eisuke's Incineroar move first, but we're not going to see Incineroar not being able to move right away, I don't think.
Well, I believe they were just trying to match the fake outs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they played an honest coin flip, if you will. Just went for the fake out on each other, or potentially the fake out was going over to the Zacian, but it doesn't matter. Eisuke's go first, shuts down that Incineroar, and maybe, you know, there was a definite feeling from Eisuke that Daniele was going to play the Moltres safely, does switch it out, and that means there's a substitute up and sticking around. That's absolutely huge for a Zacian. It's something we've not seen in a little while. When Zacian was first coming to the format, I think all of them had substitute, but now we've mixed it up a little bit. We have decided to go with some more attacking options, such as the Play Rough in that slot, and going back to basics is going to help this Zacian get a lot of wiggle room. There is going to be a Dynamax, and it's not going to be the Galarian Moltres in this game after it struggled. So maybe Daniele really looking to the key factor in game number 1 was that even if Groudon came in, he could control the weather with the Dynamax Kyogre. That is the thing that he's really, really leaning in on. And, of course, it does take the Behemoth Blades very, very nicely.
Yeah, it's not only that, though, as well, right? I mean, look at that close combat. It's going to do barely anything to that Kyogre, and we're still going to see those drops come through. Yes, Zacian is still hiding behind a substitute, but now that this Max Geyser is going to fire off in the rain, that substitute is not going to take that super well.
But the big thing is, that wasn't directly into the Zacian, and that is really big. I do think the close combat is underwhelming, and that's something I'm very curious about when you look at, you know, how did Eisuke build this team? Why close combat instead of Sacred Sword? We've all agreed that Sacred Sword is the move choice. Yes, you would like the fighting option, but close combat, maybe there's a knockout it gets, but it does feel pretty bad. And now that substitute's gone, you are more vulnerable with those defense drops. You know, Zacian can take hits pretty nicely. You know, it's just sort of a naturally bulkier Pokemon. But after those close combat drops, it looks way easier to knock it out, as this Flareblitz does a lot, even in the rain. If there was, of course, a neutral weather or the sun, that would have been an easy knockout. So smart, I think, there of, you know, Eisuke to throw up the Venusaur once again. He's also got the Kyogre locked a little bit. Being able to lock that Kyogre in with the special attack drop from the parting shot, it's so tough. You want to keep it in, you want to keep it resetting the weather in case the Groudon turns up, but it could just get caught by a G-Max Vine Lash right now.
Yeah, and that, I mean, despite the fact that, you know, you will be able to take that a little bit more comfortably, we saw the survivability of that Kyogre in the face of that Frenzy Plant. You still don't want to be taking too much damage. And with the Venusaur being as speedy as it is, in the sun, you know that you're going to be taking that damage first and don't want to fall to a critical hit or anything like that.
It's certainly a tough situation as Zacian leaves the field for Eisuke. So already, yeah, he's going for it with the weather play. He must be confident he can knock out the Kyogre here, because otherwise I think we get a run back of that early situation in Game 1 where you just set the sun, you get one turn of Chlorophyll, and then, of course, you immediately get Max Geysered, and then you start to really struggle from there. So the Moltres coming back into play, maybe saving that Fake Out and Intimidate combo for later, and unsurprisingly, it is going to be the Venusaur going Gigantamax. He's got to be really believing in the ability of this you know, G-Max Vine Lash to be able to get the one-hit knockout on this Kyogre. And with the Assault Vest, you're asking a whole lot.
Definitely are, but you know, that Kyogre has taken just a bit of chip, so it might be a little bit easier or within range of some type of damage roll, but the G-Max Vine Lash really doesn't do much at all still. Just brings that Kyogre to just below half HP, and now, while you got that residual damage up, Kyogre gets to go for a Max Geyser, and that's still a lot. Like, that Groudon is not happy.
Yeah, once again, it's well over half, and the item choice on this Groudon just doesn't seem to be helping it in these situations that he needs in this game. Of course, Moltres coming in is going to get worn down by the G-Max Vine Lash, and there is a world where that can be very, very important, but we'll get to that later. The Kyogre is the big issue right now. The Kyogre, once again, has its rain set up, feeling really, really good about that. You know, this could just be a hard pivot to maybe get Groudon back out. But my concern is what comes in. Incineroar will get knocked out. Zacian will take a huge amount of damage and probably get knocked out, because this Kyogre can kind of do whatever it wants right now. And that is a massive, massive concern, particularly as it goes into its final turn of Dynamax and would be able to just lay down the damage.
The Venusaur might still be faster, though, despite the rain being up. I think that still remains to be seen. I'm not sure if we had seen that interaction before in a previous game, but we're going to see the switches first. So Groudon leaving the field, Incineroar coming in. This does provide some type of fake-out pressure or the ability to pivot with a parting shot later, knowing that Daniele has some really nice answers to what is in the back. And there it is. Yeah. G-Max Vine Lash is going to go first, and that Kyogre, 1 HP, and a dream here. Holy moly, that Venusaur, you know, it's going to have to take some damage here too, but the Hurricane as well from the Galarian Moltres also gets the confusion onto the Incineroar. Here comes the Max Geyser too, and that is just going to be insult to injury here as you get the knockout onto the Incineroar.
And that's a big pivot piece gone for Eisuke's team. Being caught there with the switch in, yes, something was going to go down. I wasn't ever convinced that G-Max Vine Lash was going to get there. It felt so underwhelming. And I always thought that, yes, even if you hit it, you know, you are just going to be able to take it, even with the Vine Lash between turns. Yes, there is a potential for a low damage roll, but that is absolutely huge. And being able to pick off that Incineroar really, really helps out. Yes, you do go to a 3-3 matchup, but you have your Incineroar left, and you are looking at an opposing side which has both the Zacian and the Groudon. They both hate being intimidated. You, on the other hand, have now taken it away, so when your Zacian comes back in at some point, you are going to be able to cause a number of problems. This Groudon is exceptionally low too, is setting up the drought, so everything rides on the Venusaur for this turn, which, you know, when it comes to trying to set as much damage as it can, it's being asked to do a lot, particularly with predominantly single target attacks. There's the confirmation of the item on the Groudon. It's the White Herb, but the Incineroar can still switch out and come back in later.
It can, but do you really want to switch in the Zacian knowing that there may be the opportunity to go for something like the Precipice Blades here? I mean, holy, I don't think it matters anymore. That critical hit going to knock out the Galarian Moltres, and that was still going to be excessive damage in the sun, but seeing that Galarian Moltres isn't going to have that much value in this game is not great. Incineroar as well, taking the Rock Slide, and it will be able to go for the Flare Blitz though, so yeah, the Venusaur is out of here, but this 2v2 situation, you don't have the ability to pivot in the Incineroar anymore when the Zacian's going to come in.
No, the Incineroar isn't going to get to land an impactful Intimidate in this game, and it's also going to get knocked out at the end of the turn, so this Zacian has a whole lot of work to do. That said, I mean, you've got to be cautious. It's going to be a tough situation. I do think Daniele is still kind of in this one, just because of how low something like the Groudon is. I mean, you can easily level it up, then it might just come down to the training. So the Zacian over on his side is full health. They're both going to get their boosts, and they're both going to be able to hold on to those boosts.
Well, the one thing that I think makes this a little bit more favored for Eisuke right now is the fact that we saw the Zacian on Eisuke's side get the Intrepid Sword boost first, and in previous games as well, we've also seen Eisuke's Zacian move first. So this Behemoth Blade is going to be able to target down Daniele's final Pokemon in that Zacian to be able to get it quite low. And if this Groudon is able to survive here, even if it doesn't, you know, that Eisuke's Zacian can just kind of clean it up here.
It's all about the Zacian, and honestly, as long as this Groudon connects a move, which it definitely should do, you really are. You're playing for the miss, but it does have moves that can miss a whole lot. There's the Precipice Blades. It is going to connect.
There you you go.
And Eisuke is going to be able to take this set 2-1. What a fine comeback. And that is a difference in the way that they transition in different regions. We've talked about this before. Japanese players love a fast Sasha.
They do.